Hi, my name is Angie Lai. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the program on the environment at the University of Washington. The title of my presentation is Putting the Trust in Trust Responsibility, Sovereignty, and Climate Adaptation for Federally Recognized Tribes, Nations, and Confederacies. I did this work as part of my senior Capstone research project, where I also interned with the US Environmental Protection Agency in Region 10, which encompasses Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska. My work is important because today, many American Indian and Alaska Native communities in this region are experiencing negative impacts of climate change, such as degraded infrastructure and displacement that both directly and indirectly threaten their ability to exercise their sovereign rights. American Indian and Alaska Native people have the right to self-determination, and the federal government has a moral and legal responsibility to address these threats, according to the trust doctrine or the trust responsibility. This is particularly true given this country's prior historical policy of Indian termination that involved the assimilation, relocation, and allotment of Indigenous people. So that brought me to the question, what are two promising practices for federal agencies to prioritize federally recognized tribal sovereignty and climate adaptation efforts? And as you can see from figure one, climate is a top priority for many federally recognized tribes, nations, and confederacies in this region. Building on this information, I investigated this question through interviews, a literature review, and personal experiences over the course of my internship. In synthesizing what I found, the top two promising practices can be categorized and identified as one, actually fulfilling the trust responsibility, and two, valuing traditional ecological knowledges as science and applying those systems of knowledge legally and respectfully. More specifically, this means increasing accessibility and flexibility for funding, providing more resources, and working on a government to government basis. In addition to working as equals on that government to government basis, the resilience of American Indian and Alaska Native communities must be recognized so that we can learn from them and apply traditional ways of navigating our changing world. I also wanted to note that 50% of respondents identified capacity as a barrier to exercising sovereignty and climate adaptation, usually in the context of saying that a particular community lacks the capacity to address their environmental goals. But 14% of respondents who were tribally affiliated criticized the use of this term in this context as inaccurate due to its conceptualization in Western thought and reflection of systemic biases that generally ignore American Indian and Alaska Native people's longstanding historical knowledge of their lands and relations. Um, so with all that in mind, what are the broader implications of this research project? There should be more accessible and flexible sources of funding so communities can address their environmental goals on their terms. There should be more interagency coordination, such as interagency work groups and the use of memorandums of understanding. So bureaucratic processes can be simplified and funding can be streamlined. Education and training on American Indian and Alaska Native history and rights should be provided. So there's more critical thought and the actual implementation of the trust responsibility is more likely. And long-term planning should be the goal so that a relationship of co-management can be fostered continuously.